Good evening, boys and girls. Are you ready for bed? Are you ready for a bedtime story? Well, this story is about a little girl who also listened to a bedtime story and had a dream that changed her life forever. It changed her life for the better because she learned a lesson in that dream, one that she never forgot. So let's see where this story takes us. The story has been requested from all the way over there in the United States of America. It's amazing where these stories come from. So let's begin. Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Scarlet who lived in a very wonderful place near the ocean called Myrtle Beach. It was a very beautiful place, and it had not changed for a very long time. However, one day, after Scarlet woke up from a dream, the place had changed completely. It had changed completely to her, but not to many people else. You see, the dream that Scarlet had made her realize something very, very special. Made her realize that she had the power to change herself. And for that reason, she changed the way she looked at the world. And for that reason, she changed the way that she saw the world. And now that's why Myrtle Beach became a very different place from yesterday, the day before. And so this story is about how and why and when the story begins at school. It was the middle of the summer, and the school were preparing for a midsummer festival. Her class teachers had asked her what kind of festival and what kind of performance that her and her friends would like to do, and they'd all gathered together and decided that because they'd heard about these wonderful, mysterious mermaids that swim around in Myrtle Beach. Of course, none of them had actually seen a mermaid, but they were very, very sure that they did exist because they'd heard about it, and they'd all seen them on the TV anyway. So they decided that they would like to put on a performance to do with mermaids, like a mermaid show. And so the teacher had given them all this paper and cardboard and materials and glue and paints and sticks and you name it, to go away and make some mermaid's tales. And they were very, very busy. They'd been watching the telly, and they'd been watching the movies, and they'd been looking on Google to try and find the most beautiful mermaid tales that they could make. And so, while they were busy doing this, the teacher clapped her hands and stopped the class and said, "Hello, children, I'd like to introduce you to a new student that's attending today." It was another little girl who just joined the class. The little girl immediately walked over to where Scarlet was sitting with a group of friends and sat down. She was a very pretty little girl, and so everybody liked her. They got on very, very well, and as they were starting to make the mermaid's tales, it appeared that this little girl had not used scissors before, and so, when she was making her mermaid's tale, it looked rather peculiar. She had to rip the tail with her hands because she couldn't use the scissors, and so it looked rather funny. You could say it was a mermaid's tail, but it was a bit smaller than all the other tails, and so Scarlet's friends, the other three, started to tease the girl for her tail. Scarlet knew that this was wrong, but because she was friends with the girls and she'd just met this other girl, the new one, she kept quiet and didn't say anything. At lunchtime, they played well together and they had their lunch. The new girl said that this school lunch was much better than her old school and that she really liked everybody in the school, but she felt a bit sad for being teased about a tail because she'd never used scissors before. Scarlet said, "Don't worry, it's okay, I can help you use the scissors." And so after lunch, when they continued to make the tails for the mermaids, Scarlet helped the new girl learn how to use the scissors. But it was kind of late in the day, and the teacher said, "Have you got all your tales ready for tomorrow's practice?" And they had to quickly rush to get the tales that they'd made in the morning finished off, and so it seemed that the new girl had to wear the tail that was different from everybody else's. Even though they were getting on very well, as people do in grade 2, and even though they'd all been doing hula hoops in the lunchtime break, there was actually something that kept in the way. As they were parading in the new mermaid's tails that they'd made that morning, Scarlet's friends again teased the new girl for her tail, for being too small and too strange and too weird. It was very, very colourful, but it didn't look right, not as nice as the girls had made. Thought Scarlet, as she kept quiet again. That's not right. But she didn't say anything at all, and she felt sad, and she saw the new girl who was feeling sad as well. That day, as she went home, she told her mum about the story, about how her friends had teased the girl about her tail, and that how the girl had not used scissors before, and it wasn't her fault that her tail looked a bit funny. So her mum said, "So what did you say to your friends?" I didn't say anything." "Why not?" Scarlet thought for a while. She couldn't really think about the good reason. She knew that it was wrong to tease people for things like that. And she even said to her mum, "It was wrong, I wouldn't do that." "Did you tease her as well, Scarlet?" "No, of course not, Mum. You know I'm better than that." "Well, if you didn't tease her and you let the other girls keep doing it, then what's going to happen if you keep quiet? Do you think they're going to automatically stop teasing her?" I guess not." "Well then, there's only one thing you can do, right?" I guess so. I could tell my friends that it's not good to tease other people." "Well, there you go then." And so the next day was the practice for the play, and it was a Friday because they'd already arranged the play for the following Tuesday. As they were getting on the stage, Scarlet's friends started to tease the new girl again, who then burst into tears. Scarlet rushed over to the new girl and tried to console her by putting her arms around her, saying, "Don't worry." But she didn't say anything to her friends. And so, after the girl had stopped crying, Scarlet eventually plucked up the courage, and after she took off her tail, she walked over to her friends and said, "Don't you think it's a bit harsh to be treating your friends like that, a new friend especially, just because she doesn't have a pretty tail like yours and ours?" "Don't be silly, Scarlet. Look at that tail, it's so stupid and so silly." Well, Charlotte didn't really want to argue and didn't want to fight about it, and it was home time anyway, so she put the tail in a bag and went back home. At dinner, Mummy asked her again about the situation, but she didn't say anything. She felt even worse that she couldn't have stood up for her friend even more. She felt a bit sick, really, because she knew what was right, but she couldn't and didn't do anything about it. That night, Scarlet had a dream. When she was asleep, she woke up with her eyes wide awake, and she looked around, and she panicked. She was in the ocean, under the ocean, a long way under the ocean, and she looked up, and she could see the moonlight, the summer moonlight shining down through the water. She couldn't breathe, and she took a big gasp of air. Her lungs filled with water, and she panicked even more, until She breathed out and breathed in again, and the water came in and out and in and out. But she could breathe. But she was under the water. She couldn't believe it. After her panic had settled down and she got used to the strange feeling of breathing in and out through the water, she started to look around. And she looked down at her tail, and she had the most beautiful, shiny, sparkling mermaid's tail that you'd ever seen, much better than any of the paper tails that they'd been making all week. She couldn't believe it. She didn't know whether she was in a dream or not. She started to swim. She could swim up and down and around in all the ways that a mermaid can swim. And then, through the twinkling moonlight shining through the water, she saw a little sparkle at the bottom of the ocean. She swam down, faster and faster and faster. The ocean water flashed past her face as if it was wind when she was running fast. This is amazing, she thought. As she got to the bottom of the ocean, she brushed away the sand and she picked up a diamond ring. Whose is this ring, she thought. As she looked at the ring, it was engraved and it had some words on it. It said something like, "Leaders are not followers, and followers are not leaders. Sometimes it's painful to stand alone, but it's not easy doing what's right." Well, that was a long inscription for such a small ring, but I guess mermaids have really good eyes to see small writing on small rings. Anyway, she put the ring on, which fit quite perfectly on one of her fingers, and she swam around. As she was swimming, she saw another group of mermaids. She swam along, and they didn't really seem to mind that she was there and that she was seemingly a fresh mermaid. And as she got closer, she could see that in the middle of these mermaids was a smaller mermaid crying. The mermaids were all teasing this little one for having a small, strange tail. "You can't swim like us. You're not very fast. Call yourself a mermaid? You're more like a fish," they said to this little girl. Scarlet knew exactly what to do, and she barged into the middle and said, "Hey, it's not very nice to tease someone because of the way they look or because of their tail. It's not fair that you do that. It's not right. Even if she has got a small tail, it's her tail, so leave her alone." The other mermaids looked at her. They knew that she was serious, and they could see the truth coming out. And so they all swam away and left the little mermaid on the floor. Scarlet picked up the mermaid, and the little mermaid thanked her very, very much. And then they swam back up to the ocean. And as they swam up and into the ocean, into the moonlight, Scarlet breathed up, and she was sitting in a bed, breathing the air in a bedroom coming through the open window. Oh, it was a dream, she thought. And as she looked down to check to see if she did have a mermaid's tail, she saw that she didn't. She saw that she had her own legs, which was quite a relief, because she was wondering how she'd get to school if she had a tail like a mermaid. But when she looked at her finger, she saw the sparkling diamond ring and wondered how it got there. Was it really just a dream? And she took it off, and she looked at it, and the inscription was still the same. And then she realized the lesson that she'd learned. She went back to sleep for a while, and when she got up and got dressed and had a breakfast downstairs, her mum didn't really say anything to her about what had been happening, and she didn't tell her mum about the dream. She told her a little bit later, but that morning there was one thing she knew she had to do, and when she got back to school, she met her friends, and she told them outright. She sat them down, one by one, and explained to them exactly what they were doing was wrong, and exactly why she felt that teasing people because of the way they looked, or the way that they couldn't do something, or the way that the tail was too small, or anything, was just simply wrong, and that she wouldn't stand for it. And if they couldn't be friends with her and the new girl, well then she would go alone, by herself, and she wouldn't be friends with these girls anymore. And actually what happened was, the group of girls that were teasing the new girl, decided they didn't want to play with Scarlet for a while, and Scarlet, unfortunately, had to be by herself. Although she wasn't by herself, she had the new girl as a friend, and even though she felt a bit sad for having lost a few friends, she felt relieved and empowered because she was standing as a leader, not a follower, by herself. And the funny thing is, because she'd taken this step and she was leading, she was being herself, and she was standing up for what's right, eventually, one by one, all those girls came back. All those girls made friends again with Scarlet, and they all, one by one, apologized for what they'd done. And one by one, they all became friends again. And then, even though they were a group of friends, it seemed that Scarlet was an individual all by herself, full of friends. And I think that's the biggest lesson that she learned that day was, you can be an individual, and you can do things as a leader. It doesn't mean you have to be by yourself, even though sometimes it feels like you're by yourself, but it just means you have to be yourself. Be your own leader and do what's right. Do what's right for you. And so, when she got home that day, she told her two older brothers what had happened, and they were just blown away by how grown up and how amazing the little sister was. And they said they probably couldn't do something like that, not anyway. And then, as she was playing with Cotton, her pet dog, and thinking about how much she would love to be a nurse when she grows up, because nurses kind of help people and take care of people like she did with a new girl, she thought it was quite interesting. And then, finally, the performance came, and her and her friends and the new girl, who was not a new girl anymore, had their mermaid performance, and everybody cheered and everybody smiled on Myrtle Beach by the ocean in summertime. The end.